Hello, welcome to another edition of Crop Life Retail Week. I'm Eric Sfiligoj, Crop Life and Crop Life Iron Editor, here again with Lara Sowinski, my partner in crime. Laura, how you doing?
Really good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well, except I don't know if this is since we normally talk weather and actually have a weather item to discuss, we can go into that. I don't know how it's going there in Texas, but here in Ohio, we have not had rain for about 2 weeks. I haven't mowed my lawn in 2 weeks because other than a few stray weeds, nothing has really grown, and it is getting very patchy and brown. So not sure if that's what you're dealing with or not.
No, we had one nice storm come through the other day, typical Texas storm, hail, lightning, boats floating down the street. No, not quite,
Oh,
but yeah.
sounds joyful.
Yes.
Yeah, luckily our storms aren't near that nasty, at least not in the summertime. But anyhow, I bring all this up, of course, because I read a report recently that said about 34% of the corn belt is in conditions that are considered drought, and that will potentially have an impact on the crop. But then our friends at the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, in their efforts to share information with me for the upcoming Maggie show, sent me a note regarding the weather in the state of Illinois, very important corn state, of course. And according to meteorologists there, that most areas in Illinois have precipitation below normal over the last month, 25% to 60% below normal. And again, they were mentioning the fact that for Chicago and the surrounding area, this was the fourth driest May on record. And in Quincy, a little more important for the agricultural community, this was the third driest May on record. So again, in the state of Illinois, apparently precipitation is a little hard to come by, and I'm sure that's not helping the plants that are already in the ground and trying to come up and get the crop going for this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I believe on last week's retail week recording, we were talking about the rain, and you were hopeful that something was going to come along, but yeah, I've been watching it too now that you alerted me to it. And I've also been watching the wildfire smoke that's drifted down over. I'm assuming that doesn't have any bearing on, obviously, the precipitation part, but I think just being outside. But
It's funny you mentioned that, because I know driving in this morning to the office, I saw quite a bit of cloud cover, and I thought, oh, just maybe we're going to get some rain. But then everyone on the radio was mentioning, oh, no, this is all the haze from the wildfires up in Canada that's making its way into our skies and making our air a little hazardous to breathe. So unfortunately, no, we're not. I mean, it was been hazy and overcast, but sort of, and apologies to my friends in Oregon, but like a day in Portland. I've been out that way before and been there for weeks at a time and never seen the sun, but never saw any rain. It was just overcast the whole time. So very similar conditions we're dealing with here today in Ohio. So
yeah, well, hoping some rain comes along, because yeah, that would be, not a great start to the growing season this summer. So
yeah. Well, speaking of not great starts, thank you for that segue. I'm going to pitch this over to you because you said you had some information to give regarding the update. We've been following the story, of course, regarding the workers and the ports on the West Coast. And I guess you have an update on what is going on or not going on. So take it away, Miss Laura.
yeah, no, thank you. We have been talking, off and on, about the U.S. West Coast longshore contract negotiations, which started last May, prior to the expiration of the contract, which was in July of last year. So since July, the Pacific Maritime Association, which represents steamship lines, terminal operators, on the West Coast, U.S. West Coast, and Longshore, have been talking, and kind of hopeful. It started off on a better foot, I would say. And over the months, some of the stickier issues, such as technology, that's always been kind of, every time there's contract talks, it's obviously the longshoremen want, people and to preserve jobs, don't want a huge impact from technology and so forth that would, deplete their ranks. This time it's about wages, though. So we've kind of been going, month after month. And I think we've talked about this a few times, the longer it goes on, there's always a threat. Hey, things are really going to unravel. And they did. Last Friday, June 2nd, we saw slowdowns and lunches that weren't staggered. So therefore, port operations were impacted. Over the weekend, likewise, similar things, slowdowns, not only at LA Long Beach, but Oakland, Port of Oakland, and then up to Seattle as well. So, and like I said, this time it's about wages. My friend, Peter Tershwell, the Journal of Commerce, wrote an opinion piece, and he said, one thing that's kind of bad timing on the part of the longshoremen last year when the carriers, for instance, had record profits. I mean, billions and billions. That would have been the time to kind of strike while the iron's hot, if you will. And, those wage increases, that conversation probably could have gone a little better at that time. This year, of course, we're again, swings in the supply chain, swings in capacity and so forth. Not surprisingly, the carriers are seeing a dramatic fall in profits for this year. So this issue about wages, the longshoremen are using that really as the leverage. Like, look, you all had record profits, you benefited. We, on the other hand, particularly during the pandemic, we were out there, we were making sure the food supply chain was supported and that things, consumer products were moving when they were. They had longshoremen, that job obviously comes with, it's dangerous work. And several longshoremen lost their lives during that time, not only to COVID, of course, but, on the job. So right now, my take on it is this, I wrote the column for our July crop life, and while this type of posturing and contentious negotiations are kind of typical what we see every time contract talks come up between the PMA and ILWU, this time I think it's different. And the reason being, and again, every time this happens, shippers are like, okay, that's it. We've got to, can't use LA Long Beach anymore. Every time this happens, we get disrupted. But obviously, LA Long Beach, super close to Asia as far as, major gateway for bringing in products from Asia that are either consumed there in a population center along the West Coast or go into the Midwest or East Coast, rail, truck. This time, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, more ports on the East Coast, Charleston, Savannah, Gulfport, Port of Houston, for instance, all have done major infrastructure investments to support higher volumes of cargo. So these ports now are more competitive than they ever have been, at least for containerized cargo. Likewise, the pandemic, with people being able to relocate with remote work, hey, before they had to go into the office. Now, a lot of them have an option. We could work remotely. Well, gosh, let's move to the Southeast. Cost of living there is attractive, wet weather, all those things. So the ports are more competitive. There are more viable links. You have a population center now that can consume a lot of the goods. So I think that this time, I was thinking when I was writing my column, that phrase, being too big to fail. Well, from Rome to, every time when we look back, if something seems untouchable or that'll never happen, well, things do happen. I mean, we saw during the recession 2008, we saw financial institutions collapse, ones that we thought were, would never collapse. And the pandemic now, we're seeing things that we never thought we'd see. So, what's the lesson here, and what can we learn? I think that what we've been talking about, not only just the talks, but in the ag space and any other sector, how do we look at what we're doing, our business, where products and supplies and raw materials are coming from, where do they go? Just having a more, broad look at the supply chain, and always kind of having a plan B, a contingency plan, a diversified supply chain. If this happens, what if? Where do we go? How do we? So, it just these things keep on happening over and over again, where it demonstrates and illustrates just having that mindset that anything can happen, and sometimes these changes are permanent. They're not just a reaction to something that will go back to normal, because I think the pandemic showed us there is no normal anymore. It's a reset of sorts, but it's changed, and some of these changes are more permanent. So as of today, talks are still ongoing. The ILWU issued a statement saying, we're talking. They haven't entirely slammed the door shut, but we'll see what happens. Worst case scenario, in 2002, contentious talks, and it was so bad that President Bush had to invoke the Taft-Hartley Act to, force longshoremen back to work. So we'll see what happens. And just in the last 2 days, not only U.S. West Coast longshoremen, but now those in Canada are going to have a strike vote on June 9th and 10th. So if Canada longshore workers go out, that's Port of Vancouver in Canada, Port of Prince Rupert north of that. Those are two significant gateways that go into Chicago and the Midwest. A lot of ag product moves back and forth. So, man, this could get hairy, hairier than it already is. So, that's the update. I'm absolutely kind of keeping an eye on the news hour by hour, because these things can, move pretty quickly, especially when we're talking about a strike or work stoppages. So
Sure.
That's the update as of today.
All right. Well, and again, as you pointed out in your column, which I read before I went into the magazine, that they've been without a contract for almost a year now. July 2022 is when the last one expired. So, unfortunately, I know on occasion I've heard of unions and their employers going through, going well past contract expiration dates and still trying to hammer things out years later. Hoping that doesn't happen here, but we will see. And again, thank you for the segue, because speaking of things that we've been talking about that seemingly will not come to a head or conclusion anytime soon, I know we've been talking a lot about the biotech corn debate between the U.S. and Mexico, and I did see that at the tail end of last week, actually, just before we had our video air, but after we had recorded, the U.S. formally requested some arbitration to be conducted regarding that dispute with Mexico and the importation of biotech corn. So, again, folks were speculating this is something that could be a persistent problem all the way through the rest of 2023. And it sounds like the wheels are moving, but incredibly slowly. So it'll be interesting to see if this breaks quickly, or it takes the rest of the year for them to come to some type of agreement through arbitration. So again, stay tuned for future videos for updates on that.
Sure. Sounds good. I saw that news too, and I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah,
'Cause-
no, like I said, we'll have more as we find out more. But yeah, at this point, the formal request is in, so stay tuned for more, I guess, wranglings and debate going forward on this topic.
Interesting.
All right. Well, no debate what's coming up next as we get ready to end our program. Miss Laura, time for
Yes.
fun with birds.
Yay.
And I'm choking you up already. You need to have some water on hand, like one of those speakers when we do these. So,
Yeah, I know. I hardly talk because I'm always immersed in writing. So when I talk, it's like, oh, my poor little voice,
all right. Well, hey, I got an interesting number for you this week, and you'll kind of see where I'm going because your options are going to be, again, very similar. So
Okay.
your number is 12 million tons.
Oh.
And please don't even imply that's what my office chair is currently holding up. So,
I'm kind. I won't do
okay,
that.
all right. So, is 12 million tons? Is that A, the amount of wheat China has imported for the first 5 months of 2023?
Okay.
Is it B, the amount of corn China has imported for the first 5 months of 2023?
Okay.
Is it C, the amount of soybeans China has imported for the first 5 months of 2023? Or is it D, the amount of Chick-fil-A sandwiches I've eaten for the first 5 months of 2023? And I tend to stop a lot of those when I'm on the road traveling, and I've been doing a lot of traveling this year, but I don't think I've consumed quite that much tonnage of Chick-fil-A sandwiches just yet.
I'm going for A, wheat.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know, that's not a bad guess because remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the fact that China had said they were going to try to wean their folks off of soybean and move more to wheat.
Yeah.
But apparently the importers in China haven't gotten the memo because the correct answer is C.
Soybeans?
Soybeans, yes. According to the statistics from the General Administration of Customs, China has imported a record 12 million tons of soybeans through the first 5 months of the year, and that's up 24% from a year ago.
Wow.
And the total tonnage is on pace for about 42 million tons when all is said and done. So again, I know the Chinese folks said they weren't going to start trying to use more wheat, less soybean, but the importers apparently still like their soybeans, so they're bringing more into the country as we speak. So,
well, all the more important that these labor talks get resolved sooner than later. So, our ag exports aren't impacted. So, yeah, no, that's good.
Yep.
Well, bummer, I missed that, but
yeah, that's all right. That's all right. We'll get them again next week, and maybe, fingers crossed, we'll have a special video next week, at least in format, if things go well. But we'll have folks, if you want to see what we're talking about, tune in next week for that. But for this week, that's all we have. So thanks for joining us for Crop Life Retail Week. I'm Eric Sfiligoj on behalf of myself and everyone here at Crop Life. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. If you have questions or comments about today's episode of Retail Week, contact us by email or Twitter, or type your message in the comment section below. Your feedback is important to us. We will try our best to address your thoughts in next week's episode, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.